Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my live streams. This is Comics Today. This is a show that we do every single Wednesday, even if we have technical difficulties getting online, but we do it on Wednesdays to celebrate the best day of the week, that being New Comic Book Day, and it happens at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I want to welcome everybody to this show. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about a topic that I have been releasing videos on for the last 2 weeks. We're going to have a guest on that is going to help me to make sense of some things that maybe I've been struggling with. And honestly, as I read your comments on the videos that I released, you too kind of vacillated in some respects on what your position actually was. And again, we're going to dig into it today, and I think it's going to be a good discussion. Before we get to that, I actually want to go to the chat, and I want to say hello to the comic book soldiers that have joined me for this live stream. And the way that we do it is that I'm going to ask you if you hit your LCS up today to let me know what it is that you may have picked up. If you did online ordering, I want to know what you picked up. And if you read something today, especially if it is a new comic that we should put on the top of our reading stacks, I want to encourage you to shout that book out so that we know what's good that hit the shops today. And I will tell you, I did not make it to the LCS today. Crazy day. Working. As soon as work was on, I went to the Home Depot. I was there a little too long. I literally had to just come into the room. Spent a little too much time at the Home Depot these days. But again, it's good to see everybody here. And I'm going to go to the chat here in just a second to see what folks may have picked up. I actually did set up new pull lists, with a new LCS. My LCS now that I'm going to be going to is about it's only maybe 14 miles, but according to the GPS, it's a 28-minute drive. It doesn't feel that way. The other LCS is about 38 minutes. So you know which one I'm already going to go to, right? So I set up a pull list. I just did not get a chance to get there today. I may try to get there tomorrow when things are a little less chaotic. Hopefully tomorrow will be that day. We shall see. So we'll go to the chat here real quick. Juggernaut, thank you, brother. So my daughter had to have surgery on Friday. There were a couple of really rough days there where she was in pain. She was frustrated. She had to take medication. She didn't like the medication, so we had to negotiate with her. Yesterday was much, much better. She received no pain meds of any kind, didn't spike a fever, and was her normal self. And today has been very much the same. So very thankful that she seems to be on the road to recovery right now. So I'm looking at the chat right now. Steve says he picked up Venom 200. That's what's up. Quest Dog pre-ordered Bad Ideas Final 5, Venom, X Corp, 7 Secrets, all good books. And Quest Dog, I don't think that you are the only person that actually ordered those final 5 and actually saved yourself a couple of bucks. I think the final price, before tax, was $119 if you pre-ordered today. So shout out to you and for other people that actually did pull the trigger on what it is that Bad Idea is doing. Paranormal Skill Gaming is picked up, I should say, Venom 35, Stillwater, issue number 8. Fantastic read. Stillwater's great. Berserker 3, Walking Dead, the deluxe, and then Alien 3. Scrolling through, thank you, brother. I definitely appreciate that. Scrolling through some of the comments here. We may have to mute somebody. I hope the Blue Wrenches are paying attention to that. You may have to mute somebody who is a little bit on a rant here. So Mark Andrews, Rangers of the Divide, 2 House of Lost Horizons. I may be running together multiple titles, so you have my apology. Time Before Time. I read issue 1. That was good. Issue 1 was good. I have not read issue 2. Berserker Time 2. Venom 35, 7 Swords, Space Pirate Captain Harlock, issue number 1. Good stuff. Good stuff. You also picked up something else that was pretty obscure recently. I can't remember. I read the comment, but it did not stick in my head. So congrats on those. I think it was like issue number 1 and 2. But congrats to you, brother, for picking up all those books, man. So scrolling through, Jeff says he picked up Venom 200, the variant cover today. Hope this one gains some value about 10 years from now. No guarantee that that is going to happen. Honestly, you might be able to make a quick buck tomorrow. Like, you just never know in this market. 10 years, I don't know. You might be a rich man tomorrow. Who knows? What is this? Reggie, you can never spend too much. Brother, I feel like I either leave my house and I go right to go to Home Depot, or I go left to go to Lowe's. That seems to be my life right now. It's either left or right or to the post office. Didn't even make it to the post office today. But Home Depot sees me fairly often. My man Rush, my Canadian brother, Venom 200, beautiful square. Oh, they did a square bound. They did Venom 200 justice if they decided to do it square bound. ASM 800. Not that kind of love. Not that kind of love. He says, no dings. Marvel finally produced them right. That's what's up. That's what's up. They got it right for Donny Cates. No one's surprised by that. Scrolling through, seeing what else you guys are talking about. Darth says he picked up all of the variants of Venom 200, all variants of the new Captain Harlock issue number 1 as well. That's what's up, man. If that stuff makes you happy, again, you never let people poo-poo what it is that you do, man. So I picked up many of the variants of Noctera. So, do what makes you happy, whatever that thing is. Steve says, oh yeah, Stillwater. I have 32 books to go through. Read that incorrectly. Let me see. Who else is picking up some books here? Joshua, which of the 10 Well said, brother. Well said. Let me see. Who is this? Eric picked up Rabbit World, Alien 4, The Worst Dudes, Philadelphia 13, X-Men, Planet Size. That's what's up. Let me see. Scrolling through some of the other comments here, seeing what else. Again, if that continues, you just put it in timeout for 5 minutes. That's what you do with that one. Rush Diehard also picked up Geiger 1. The 4th print. That's what's up. There are way too many covers. My man, Just a Little Podcast. How you doing, brother? Darth Ultra Mega has been enjoyable for sure. I enjoyed the first issue of Ultra Mega. Then it took a curve on me with, I think it was issue 2 or 3. I can't remember. Might have been 3. Took a little bit of a curve. I may have to go back and revisit it and see if it came back around on the other side for me to be able to get back on board. Picked up Sunburn. I'm going to tell you. I think I told you guys once before I got sunburn. I don't know that I had truly, experienced it where I recognized it for what it was. But that sun on my dome, man, and the peeling that followed was just brutal. So I feel for you, homegrown. I don't know what you do, brother. But sunburn is a monster. Scrolling through some of the other comments here. What is this? Not nearly as good. Geiger cover looks good. Again, scrolling through some of the comments. All right, good stuff, man. So my hope is that I'm going to be able to make it to the LCS tomorrow to pick up my own stuff. Before we get too deep, I actually want to give a quick reminder for those that have not yet watched Sunday show, in which I gave away the Moon Knight issue number 21, the 9.8. This book still has yet to be claimed. The winner actually has until Sunday to claim the book, and then it goes to second place. And again, just wait for me to announce that the book has not been picked up before you send emails. That way, nothing gets lost, right? We like to do things in an orderly fashion. And one of the books that we are giving away this week, simply for watching videos that come out from the channel, is this one right here, New Gods, issue number 1. It is an 8.0. One lucky subscriber is going to be getting this book this coming Sunday. And I will tell you that potentially we're going to be giving out something before the end of the show. So I definitely want to encourage people to stay tuned for that. Over the last 2 weeks or so, I have released 2 videos in which I have debated a topic that was thrown out by one of you. One of you suggested a topic that I initially dismissed. I initially dismissed it, then I noodled it, and then I thought I had an answer, and then I noodled it some more, and then I kind of argued the other side to myself, and then I had the epiphany of just making 2 videos. One video to argue each side of the debate. And it was actually kind of fun for me to put it together, because in many ways, this is how I think. I like to evaluate things from different perspectives because it's kind of fun. It's how you, I think, strengthen your position, strengthen an argument, strengthen an idea. If you're trying to have an idea, does this make sense? Let me look at it from the other point of view and to pressure test it to see if this thing actually makes a little sense. And so again, I created these 2 videos basically debating whether comic book collecting was something for the rich. And there were lots of comments on both sides of this thing. And there were people that were like, you know, it's somewhere in the middle. I think it's in the middle. I don't think it's this or that. I think it's this, a little bit of this. And there are ways to still be in the hobby and not be rich and still enjoy it. And again, it was just a wonderful, I think, you know, exercise for me to go through. And I think other people enjoyed it as well. So I've invited my next guest on to come and to pontificate with me on this very same topic. And I have a feeling that I know where he's going to land, but I am pretty certain that he's going to throw some curveballs because that's what he does. He has these moments where I'm like, yeah, I didn't see that one coming. But to me, that's what makes all of this fun. So I want to welcome to the show right now, my buddy Doug. It is good to see you, brother. How are you?
Hey, Reggie, doing great. How are you?
I have 0 complaints, my friend. 0.
They say if you do, no one's listening anyway. So
well said. So that's why I typically have no complaints. I have a lot of issues that no one cares about. And then the complaints no one cares about. So I just keep it to myself. I was on Instagram earlier today, and I don't know if you sold a copy or if you gave a copy away. I think it was like Sandman 4 or something like that. Did you see that post?
Sandman number 10. Yep.
10. Okay.
Yeah, that was to Roger Levesque, the cranky Canadian from the YouTube channel 3 Men in the Basement. He did a great interview with me on his channel last week. And I would say a good 30 plus minutes. All we talked about was ReggieCollects.com and the blog posts.
That's funny. That's funny. I just saw the post. I didn't look to see who it was. I was just like, I was tagged and it was like, thanks to Doug. And I saw Sandman, and that's all that I saw. And as I moved on to something else, you know what I'm saying? So thank you for connecting the dots on that one. But I saw that it was related to Sandman and the blog post. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring it up. So we are going to have a little bit of a discussion. And I kind of think I know where you're going to land, at least I think. But before we get going, I have to ask you one very direct question. Are you rich? Because if you're rich, no one wants to hear from you. Okay, so go ahead.
From my perspective, no. But I do think in your videos, which were really great, by the way, where you argued both sides, I think in both, at some point you brought up, well, what does rich mean? And I do think that's an important part of the conversation, because when you say, are you rich? Well, from my perspective, I'm not rich, which is from 21st century American perspective versus a historical and global perspective, which almost everybody in your chat watching the show at some point from a different perspective might absolutely be considered rich from another perspective. So
Yep. First world problems is what we call it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, it's like, well, what is rich? Who defines that? Who decides, And it's one of those things that people throw out, but it isn't ever really defined. Like conversations we've had in the past, it's a comic book crash. Well, you brought this up. Well, what is a comic book crash? How do you define it, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the criteria in which we can evaluate whether what we are experiencing is a crash or not? And it's a good argument. I've always thought that about the rich. What is that? I mean, if you have, if you're Jeff Bezos, okay, bro, you're rich, right? Like, he's even going to say, yeah, I'm rich, but as you come down off of that to like normal people, I don't know. So, I mean, I think that you answered that question in such a way that you completely avoided answering it, which I think is well done. You gave like a robust answer, but never actually answered the question. Truly, if you are rich, that's okay. It's okay.
I still need a paycheck, so I'm not rich.
You and me both, brother. I talked to this guy named Jimmy that came here to trim my bushes. And he talked to me about Deborah. Deborah's his wife. When he married Deborah, he said, I don't, I'm gonna go out and do this work thing, and you can do whatever you want to do with the money. And before he finished that sentence, I was like, that is the worst mistake you've ever made in your life, Jimmy. Jimmy's a pretty old guy, and Jimmy's still working. And I think I know why. It's because of Deborah, But let me ask you this. So when you hear people make statements that comics are for the rich, what is your initial reaction to that type of statement?
While I'll like, spoiler alert, give everything away. While I don't agree with that statement, I do understand why there's that perception. And I think that perception is important and valid. And I do think it is impacting the hobby probably now more than ever because of exploding prices of books. And quite honestly, because in the past 20 years, since third-party grading came into being, that while it increases values in many ways, it also increases the amount of money that many people, not all, spend. Cam and Caden are coming in the door, and I'm alone with Bentley, so I'm hoping they come in really quick.
Oh my goodness. I could not hold it together. I tried. But it sounded like, from what you were saying there, that you don't believe that comics are for the rich per se, but you understand the argument that someone could make as to why they may feel that way. And I'm trying to stall here to give time for the barking to go away. So I'll stop.
I hear the door. So I think that will stop the barking.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I agree with that. And again, framing this in the context is we're speaking from a very American modern perspective, because the reality is, what we have, and the fact that we can go out and buy comic books, the fact that we, own homes, have a car or 2 cars, whatever, would make us very much rich to others. So,
yes.
But I do feel that comic collecting has some very unique elements that allow it to be cheap, even when it can be expensive. And I think we can talk about that some. But I think the perception element is important, because especially, and I don't know if this is a true statement for everybody, so I'm going to make it about my generation, which is Gen X. There has been a kind of an anchoring effect that's taken place, where many people of my generation become anchored to what they see around them from a financial standpoint. Okay, so if everybody in your neighborhood is getting an addition on their house, or buying a nicer car, or, getting a second home or a boat, that tends to, put some pressure on you, whether you realize it or not, probably internal pressure, to kind of keep up with that. Mm-hmm. And that impacted my generation greatly during the 2008 subprime mortgage financial crisis, to the point that dual income homeowners in Gen X were disproportionately impacted compared to many others. And I think it's important to note that, because some of the factors that influence that, like what we see, we think is what we should have, or mm-hmm. or what level we should live at or spend, not only will that impact our financial lives and the choices we make around everything, but it can absolutely have that same impact being a comic collector. You know, if everybody you see on YouTube is, you know, like Reggie, the day your video dropped, you open that ASM #1, right? And sometimes I think people see that or see people's Instagram and might not know the context behind that. Like, what did you have to work up to eventually get that book? What
sacrifices that I have to make in order to achieve what it is that I just showed on screen? Because there are sacrifices. That didn't just happen.
Time, money, making some smart moves, what you have to let go from your collection. All of those things impact what you get, but sometimes people don't see that context and just assume, oh, well, that's how you collect.
Or so that's just how, or that person is just rich.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because I see people driving new cars and really nice cars all the time. Since I've been here in North Carolina, I think I've seen like 5 Lamborghinis, and it's like, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. I don't feel like I should get a Lamborghini because I don't like them, but I like to look at them, right? My thinking always is that person had money once upon a time when they bought that car. I don't know what their financial situation is now.
That's exactly it. And I think sometimes we make assumptions based on what we see. And you don't know, did that person go out and buy that Grail book because they worked hard and over time built up the resources to do it? Or did they just get a brand new credit card, max it out?
There you go.
And make a choice that maybe wasn't financially sound. But kind of going back to the impact on my generation with the subprime mortgage crisis, obviously I am not blaming buyers in that situation, because there were a whole lot of bad actors, and that's another conversation that's not really about comics, you know. But there were some factors that impacted buyers of my generation. One was that we collectively, not necessarily me personally, but we collectively tended to put a lot less down because we saved less first. Yep. We tended to buy much bigger. Again, that anchoring effect to what we're seeing around us, the home our parents had after 30 years versus a starter home. So we took out larger loans. And there was a perception at that time that there was a trend, and it was a multi-year trend where housing prices were increasing steadily and consistently. And there was no long-term perspective. People assumed that this short-term trend is going to continue like this forever.
Yeah.
So I need to buy it now. Otherwise, it's just going to go up, up, and up forever, and I won't be able to afford it. And I think those are really important points, because it's not like, well, Gen X is dumb. I think that this thinking impacts many generations, including the younger ones. And if you think about the context, looking at a short-term spike trend without looking at the big picture and thinking it's going to be like this forever, that, well, I have to buy it now, otherwise I'll never be able to afford it. Yep. And if it went from $1,000 to $5,000 in a year, that means in next year it's going to be $10,000, and the year after that it's going to be $20,000, and that's not how the housing market ended up. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't paid attention to the housing market the last decade, it didn't keep going up. And comics won't forever either at that same trajectory.
So let me jump in here. So for those that are coming in a little bit late, we are having a conversation around whether comics collecting is something for the rich. And we are just having this debate using a wonderful analogy, I think, of the housing market in Gen X. And if you are listening to what Doug is saying and you are not seeing the immediate parallels to comic book collecting, the parallels are there. The short-term ramp up will potentially not last forever. The overextension of oneself, the influence of what you see as a FOMO effect on what it is that you do, the parallels are scary. And as he's talking, I'm like, yeah, check that box, check that box. Doug, continue with your thought.
You know, I'll probably pivot a little bit in a minute,
Yeah.
but you know, I think that if you look at, say, Hulk 181, which
Mhm.
is a tremendous book, and from even a long-term perspective, I think will continue to grow in value. But if you assume that it's will always be a steady increase, and you know, 20 years it will be worth what Action Comics #1 or Detective Comics 27 is worth, that's, from my perspective, probably an unrealistic expectation. But if that's your thought process, then it is a wise decision to take a big loan or use credit to invest in something that you think will just go up exponentially over the next 10 or 20 years. I do not think that is a wise decision, and I'm not recommending that anybody do that. But if that's what your thinking is, and you believe that to be true, then that can drive those decisions to make big purchases, perhaps overextending purchases. And I think that is the danger of the perception around comics, that they can, maybe not that they're only for the rich, but I know the secret because of what's happened in the last year or two, and they can make me rich
Yeah.
if I spend a
X amount of
large
money.
quantity of money. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
And I think there is definitely some danger to it. I remember one of the early videos that I actually created was around whether comic books were addicting. And I created that video because I spoke with a collector who had a gambling addiction and had come over to comics and was finding that he was repeating some of those same bad habits here, and reached out to me. We had a wonderful conversation. I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a video on this. And this was probably 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that I created. And I think that there is that effect. And what's funny, let me see if I can find this comment. My phone probably died. I think it was Nosh that made this comment where I stated that comics were a luxury. They were not a necessity. They are not like food, water, shelter, that kind of stuff. They are a luxury item that is, in my opinion, something that you buy with discretionary income. And his comment was along the line of, when he heard that, he had to stop and think about it, because I'm going to put words in his mouth. It gives him heart palpitations when he can't get the book that he really wanted. That was like the gist of it. And I think he had that moment where he's like, yeah, this isn't a necessity. This isn't like food and water, even though as collectors, because we have emotions, because of FOMO, it feels that way. You feel physically sick if you can't get the book that you want. And that is part of the danger of, I think, what you're kind of describing. Would you agree with that, or would you adjust anything that I just said there?
I 100% agree. And I think it is why it is important to, at least at some point, stop and reflect upon personal priorities and align your time and your finances with those priorities. You know, if putting food on the table, you know, paying the mortgage, top priority, but is spending quality time with your family, taking them on a vacation a priority? Is maybe saving to help or to pay for your child's education more important? Is paying off your mortgage early, being able to retire a little bit earlier? You know, if you know what your priorities are, and you know where, okay, it's after those that comics fall for me, then you align your spending habits and your budgeting with those priorities. If you don't take time to think about that and just buy on eBay, or when you see something, you can then get in trouble and end up having your spending not align with your priorities, and that creates problems.
What's fascinating there is the path that you just walked down speaks to a video that I literally just recorded the other day about prioritization and about figuring out where you're falling short and what's really important to you, and not being afraid to pivot things to make sure that you're focusing on the right stuff. And it might not be what happens in your room or in between the pages of an awesome comic. It might be other aspects of life, you know? And I created that video in response to someone that wanted me to create another video to talk about balance, right? Balance of fitness, even though I'm not doing a whole lot of that right now, but fitness and family and work and comics. How do you find balance? And people think, I think that I've kind of figured it all out. I have a methodology that works for me, that makes sense, that I make adjustments to all the time. And so I'm going to offer those things up in a video. One of the things that you alluded to earlier before we got on the subprime mortgage stuff was that there are ways in which non-rich, whatever that is, whatever rich or non-rich is, can still participate in the hobby of comic book collecting. And I actually outlined several of those things in my video as well. What are your thoughts on some of those things that people can do who have decided that they aren't rich, but still love comics?
So that's the importance of adjusting perception and understanding that not everybody is constantly spending hundreds or thousands of dollars on comics. And there are inexpensive ways to collect. And I think people need to be aware of that. The reality is, especially if you live in an area where you can access either multiple local comic shops, which I know not everybody can, or local comic shows, many places will have dollar bins or 2 for $1 or 4 for $1 bins, which you can hunt for fun bargain comics. And the reality is, and I think you mentioned this in your video, the cover price of new comics aren't cheap right now. They're $4 to $5. But there are ways to buy comics where you can buy 5 times that many for the same price. And if you've got, access to transportation and you have some places that you can shop, and you can do this online, but it's harder and different because you're going to pay for shipping.
Yeah.
But it is possible, and I've certainly done this with my brother to go out one day and say, I don't want to spend more than $10, and still go out, have a good time, look for those gems in the bargain bins, things like that. You can also look for good deals and look to upgrade those books. Whether that is go out and find a comic that's, $10, $20, then get it clean press and take that shot with CGC rather than just going out and buying the 9.8. And there are some, and from investment standpoint, some reasons maybe why sometimes it's better just to buy the 9.8, but you don't have to. It's not the only way. I've written a couple of blog posts on Bigger and Better, and it's a game that people can play where you literally start with $1 and you try and upgrade with that $1 and track the books that you upgrade to grow. I did that in part because I think it's just a fun, different way to challenge yourself and collect. If you're competitive nature and you have some other collectors, you could, almost do it like have a little wager on it, see who gets the best book. But the main reason I wrote it was because I was very aware from, watching YouTube and seeing Instagram posts that, wow, there are a lot of people dropping a lot of money. And there are people who cannot afford to do that.
Right.
And there's still other ways to enjoy the hobby. And I don't want to give everything away about the posts, they're on regiecollects.com. People can read them. But even though I kind of screwed up my game a little bit by buying a few books instead of one, with the concept of taking that $1, finding a good book, then either selling or trading that for a better book, and then continuing on that path. In my update, I talked about some of the books that I have right now or where I'm at with it. And there's some pretty good books. Like if I went out just to, or if I went on eBay and tried to buy 5 or 6 of the books that I have from doing that game, it might cost me $500, 800, something like that. And I've literally spent $1 on that. So there are ways to do it. I think that comics are somewhat unique, that if you want to go that route and just kind of treasure hunt, which is a really fun element of the hobby that I enjoy. I think Joe Anachronic Comics mentioned that in a video that he recently did, that he enjoys that too. Like sometimes it's not always about getting the book. Sometimes it's like finding that
it's the experience.
Yeah, it's finding that diamond, that no one else knows about. So, but those things, if you look at, and I'm not saying that everybody should collect this way. There's lots of different ways to collect, but absolutely, comics provide an opportunity that if you're on a very limited budget, or you're a high school student and you get like $10 for mowing the lawn, if you want, there are ways that every single week you could go out. You don't just have to buy 1 or 2 brand new books. You can go out, look for deals and for value, and build a really nice collection that way without investing nearly as much money.
The truth is that it's possible to do it. It's just not necessarily easy, right? It's not like going to the LCS or getting on eBay and just buying, right? You might have to do some work. You may have to go to a ton of antique stores or flea markets or yard sales. You may have to do some sweat equity in order to find that diamond in the rough, right? But it's still possible to participate. One thing that I want to talk to you about is the cost of modern comics. I was on Comic-Con the other day, and Comic-Con basically threw out that the current average sales price for a comic is $4.41. And historically, it had been still in the threes for like 10 years. And then all of a sudden, we're now seeing an average of $4.41. Do you think that given that comics are a luxury, do you think that is expensive, right?
I think it is, and it's certainly not the only factor, but I think that has made it one of the reasons that it is harder for younger people to get into collecting as the prices go up. There's a lot of other factors. There's, video games and focusing attention on other things. It's not like all kids have become priced out of getting new books. But the reality is, when I was buying comics in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s with my brother, our allowance was like $5 a week. I could go to an LCS for my $5 and I would spend all 5 of them in that shop every week. I could buy 5 comics for 60 cents each and like 4 packs of baseball cards for 50 cents each. And I'm not saying a kid would have a $5 allowance now, but if you'd have to have like a $40, $50 allowance at least to be able to buy that.
But let's talk about that, because I hear this argument of the kids are priced out. The kids about the kids, right? I personally don't see a whole lot of kids in comic shops. Just being honest, I don't see a ton of kids in comic shops. But Dog Man sold through Scholastic, sold 8 million copies because mom and dad bought those comics, those graphic novels that kids are reading. But back when I was working at .NET, a Shrimp Hut, and Rallies and Taco Bell, I made minimum wage. Minimum wage, I think at the time, was like $3.25, $3.50, right? In the 90s. After tax, that's a comic. That's one single comic for 1 hour time, roughly, if you do the rough math, right? Minimum wage right now, federal minimum wage. I had to look it up because I didn't know what it was. It is $7.25. In some parts of the country, it is as high as what? $12, and they are pushing for $15. Take 50% of that. That is at least one comic, roughly, right? If you're right now at the federal minimum wage, $7.25, 50% of that, you're about 78 cents short for a comic that costs $4.41, right? Is that realistically, pricing people.
And like mowing my lawn every week for that $5 so I could buy the comics. I do not know if I would have personally ever gotten in the hobby if for that $5 I could have bought, 2 comics or 1 comic and 1 pack of cards. And maybe I would have, but I don't know that I would have.
But I go back to anchoring.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
You're right.
I go back to anchoring.
Yep.
To you, like when you're rattling off, you bought multiple comics and baseball cards. I'm like, whoa, you seem rich to me. Right? I mean,
but that's how much they were then, and I would anchor to that.
But that's what I'm saying. When you talk about like a cup of coffee back then, how much was a cup of coffee? In San Francisco, Blue Bottle coffee is $5 a cup.
Mm-hmm.
$5 a cup, which is crazy. Right? Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say though, but how many kids are going to spend that $5?
Mom and dad are buying that coffee all day long, exactly. or that comic, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the point that I want to make. Well, there's many other factors that I think reduce why younger kids are less apt to get into comics now than say we were in the 80s. Again, a number of factors. I do think one of the factors probably is the price. But it's still not every book is $5. I think you pointed out like Spawn is cheaper. And quite frankly, you can get into buying back issues. Sometimes back issues are cheaper than a new book.
And we haven't even mentioned digital, because technically I feel like you can't collect digital, right? But kids like screens, or maybe kids are reading digital. We don't know, right? I mean, because that's one of the general challenges, in my opinion, with comics in general, is the lack of transparency around the data, the size of the market, print runs. Like, for this industry to be as old as it is, there is so little data. Like, what's the average age of a comic book collector? We're saying kids are being priced out. We have no clue what the average age has been. We can make assumptions, and maybe we make assumptions about the photos, black and white, that we saw little kids at newsstands reading comics, and the comics are for kids. I remember being at cons when I was a kid, and I was the only kid walking around. There was still all these, guys walking around like me now, hunting for good books with a backpack on, So it's one of those things that I hear people make the argument of, the comics these days, or the comic prices, are pricing kids out. And I also then, because I do this, look at the other side. How is an LCS supposed to stay in business when they make 50% or less of that sale when rent is as high as it is, right? They need cars. They need to put food on the table. They need to pay rent. They need to pay light bills. And if we're basically saying the average comic is $441, 50% of that or less goes to the LCS, how do they survive and actually stay in business? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm trying to look at all angles. Jump in there.
And I'm not trying to make the case that all comics should be less. Personally, as an adult collector, I like some of the nicer, higher end,
square bound, glossy.
Yeah, absolutely. Do I think that, and I don't know this, but do I think maybe having some comics geared towards a younger audience that were made with cheaper paper, newsprint, that cost $1 or $2, might help? Maybe. I don't know. It's certainly not going to make it harder for them. Young people spend money that they have, but they are also price sensitive.
That's true.
And increasing prices in the work world that I'm in public health, we know if there's something you don't want kids doing, raise the price, because kids are less likely to do it because they're price sensitive. So
then they just steal it. No, I shouldn't say that. That's wrong. But all right. So I get it. That was something that I just wanted to chat a little bit about there. It's hard to make predictions, right? It's hard to make predictions, but where do you see all of this stuff going, right? Do you see I think in a project that we're working on, you quoted, Silver Age books are going somewhere between 50 and 200% above F&V, right? We have price increases that have been taken where your national average, if you will, of comics is 441. We have, comics to some degree or another across the board kind of going up in value and people trying to extract every single dollar out of them. But we also see the world starting to open up.
Yeah.
We see California has opened up. They still have to wear masks, but California is now opening up. People are taking vacations. People are getting on airplanes. We see some of the data that is happening. What are your thoughts on where some of this may go as the world, as the country and the world open up, and as people spend up some of that discretionary income? What is your prediction? And no one's going to hold you to this, but what is your prediction?
I do think that will be and might already be part of the price corrections. I think whether, some of the prices that spike that will come down a little and then level off, or just level off, as there's less money spent. We've 100% seen this in a big way in the sports card and trading card market, big time. I don't know if all comic collectors are aware of that, but for the past 3 months, there has been a massive correction. I don't think comics went quite as nuts as cards did, but I think we're likely to slow down as well. I don't think interest will wane. You might have some people who just came in, bought some things and get out, move on to the next thing. But I think there's a high level of interest. I think what has happened this past year has generated more interest, brought people like me back into the hobby who weren't in it, for many years.
Yep.
So I think that's a good thing. I think that regardless of whether or not comics do a great job reaching a younger audience, they're reaching them through their intellectual properties in movies and streaming services. So I'm not, I'm not pessimistic of the future of comics in the industry. I'm quite optimistic, but I do think, some of the current values and massive price increases that we've seen will slow, or will adjust, in the next year or so.
Which again, I don't think would be a bad thing, to be honest with you. I think if you're buying smartly, you're not overextending yourself, and you're prioritizing things appropriately. If that correction happens, then you hopefully should be in a good place. And what I want to do, because we typically don't always go to the chat all that often when I have a guest on. If you are in the chat right now and you have a question, comment, or thought that you want us to maybe address in the last few minutes here, throw it up in all caps, because that'll actually help my old eyes to be able to see it a little bit better. And maybe Doug's as well, because he's kind of leaning in pretty close there.
I see one from Phil Tastic.
Where do you see that? Oh, here we go. My question to Doug would be, if the films start to wane, will the price of these keys wane with it? Go ahead. I'm going to let you answer it, and then I want to piggyback on Phil Tastic's question here.
I'm going to answer it simply as yes. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think we have seen, Thanos is a huge, fantastic villain. And it is, I think, to hardcore comic fans, a tremendous villain. Prices shot up during the Avengers Infinity Wars. Since that's ended, Thanos keys have come down. And that's with a property that was an all-time record breaker. So if prices adjust to a movie just based on, oh, okay, this character is probably not going to be in another movie for a while.
Yep.
Then if they're, let's say Kevin Feige went away, someone from Warner Brothers took over Marvel, that would have a negative impact on the movies and the streaming service. and would, in my opinion, definitely impact values of comics.
So I want to answer that question slightly different. What I think maybe he's getting to is people saying that there is going to be fatigue in people's interest of comic book properties as it relates to movies and TV shows. And I personally haven't seen any sign of that fatigue. And I would say that because the content that we are getting in the movies and streaming shows by and large is diverse, I don't necessarily see that type of fatigue setting in. And we haven't really seen evidence of that in the actual numbers for movies and ticket sales. And I think that if we start to see it, then I would get on board. But right now, the data would not suggest that there is that fatigue. And hopefully between my answer and Doug's answer, we've answered this question. So let me go to see whether there's something else in here. I'm kind of scrolling through here. Bear with me as I scroll through to see if there's other things that are thrown up in caps that we might want to take a look at. And for those that are coming in late, we are having a conversation about whether comic book collecting is for the rich. My guest, Doug, is the blogger that always appears on regiecollects.com. He's making some fantastic points. We started talking about Gen X and subprime loan, and I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. But there's a question here from my man, Chuck. Chuck, it is always good to see you. He says, as the price correction comes, will they be mostly moderns or all ages of comics? And I have my opinions on this, but I don't think people are asking me my opinion. I think they're asking for your opinion. So jump in there.
I think corrections will likely affect different eras differently. And I think some of the tried and true, Silver Age, some of the Bronze Age grails will fare better maybe than some modern books, but I don't think necessarily those comics will be completely exempt, because the reality is in the sports card market, some of the huge, and I mean huge, comparable, like far more valuable than Hulk 181 cards, have dipped tremendously in value over the past 3 months. Now, I do want to point out they're at a higher level than they were 14, 16 months ago before the boom started. So if you were, in on the ground level pre-pandemic, it went through the roof, it came down and is leveling out, you're still up significantly. So congratulations. But if you were buying on the upswing, a Michael Jordan Fleer rookie, which is a huge basketball card, went up, I think in January or February, to $800,000 and is now settled back around $250,000. If you bought at 600 or 700 and watched it go up to 800 and thought, yeah, I'm going to sit on this longer because I'm going to be a millionaire soon, you now have a lot of money locked up in a card that is very unlikely to hit that level for some time. Will it eventually? Absolutely. It's Michael Jordan's rookie, probably someday.
Yeah,
but if
how
you
soon?
sit on that car for 5 or 10 years, or if you can't afford to have that $600,000 that you paid for it in there, then there are problems. I'm not saying that, Fantastic Four #1 or Hulk 181 will end up with pricing the way the Michael Jordan rookie went, but it is a cautionary tale. Like if things keep really exploding, nothing is exempt from a correction.
Then you just have to wait for another pandemic, and then everything will be great again. There's a funny comment here. Being happy and content makes one rich. I'm broke, but rich beyond imagination. And yeah, my comic budget exploded a long time ago. Prince, thank you for that comment. Well done. I think we kind of addressed this one right here when the pandemic is behind us, do you think there will be a drop in interest in books? I think we kind of spoke to that one already, that there's going to be some people that are going to fall by the wayside, but then there's going to be others that are going to stick with it. And how many of each, who knows? Again, we don't have great data to be able to guesstimate even how big the comic book market is. I mean, we can figure out ticket sales. Why can't we figure out, potentially how many people are buying comics? Master Blaster has a question. Is comic collecting today a pop culture play more than the comics themselves? And I'll allow you to address that one, Doug. What's your thought there?
I think for those who enter the hobby to purely invest, probably, but not for everybody, because if people just enjoy creative content, love Something is Killing the Children because it has great writing, or love another comic for the story, for the wonderful artwork, then probably not so much. But I do think that was a great question, because from the investment standpoint, that's the driver. If there wasn't pop culture driving interest now, values would almost certainly not be what they are now.
There's a comment here from Glenn. He said, I must be in the minority as I buy comics for the love of comics, not to invest and make a profit. What I will say to you, Glenn, is I will buy every single comic in your collection for exactly cover price. I will buy every single book in your collection for cover price right now. No, what I would say is I don't think that you're saying that profit is bad.
No.
When I was a kid, I tried to bag and board every single one of my comics. I tried to take care of my comics in every way imaginable. The same way that when I scuffed my gym shoes, I went home and immediately cleaned them. The same way that I take care and maintain my house. Anything that I spend my money on, my hard-earned money on, I want to take care of it. And if it happens to be worth more later, great. But that's not necessarily the motivation per se. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that there is that big delta maybe between, Glenn, you and me. Maybe it may seem that way, but when you boil it down, hopefully maybe that helps you to understand my point of view. There are so many books in this room that are completely worthless in terms of value, but I was entertained by them when I read them, and I love collecting them and sorting them and organizing them and rebagging and boarding because it's great for my mental health. Doug, jump in there.
Totally agree. There are people who buy purely to read. There's people who buy purely for investment, but I think the vast majority, and I could be wrong, are a hybrid of both.
Hold on, stop. Glenn said I can buy every book in this collection. I heard he had Hulk 181 and some other books. I'm on it. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead, brother.
There you go. Yeah. Lock that in. I think the majority of collectors are a hybrid. We have books in our collection that we'll never let go of, despite what, the Overstreet price guide or Go Collect say is the value, because there's an emotional connection, whether it's because it was great artwork, great story, or something else. But I think a lot of us, not again everybody, do part of the fun of the hobby is watching the values go up and down. And oh my gosh, I picked a comic, or I bought a couple of copies of that book and it spiked. That's fun. For me, is it going to make or break my personal financial life? No, because that's not where it is in my priorities and not where I spend. But it's fun, and it's one of the reasons that I really enjoy the hobby.
Yep. And I can tell you, there's nothing better than finding, buying a book relatively inexpensively and seeing it hit like a hot list. And you're like, cool, that's awesome. Let me put that back in my bin and cover it up. Right. And that to me is the cool part of it. But I personally have enjoyed this conversation with you, brother. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. And I think hopefully people here have that are in the chat right now. And I definitely want to encourage you, if you are here in the chat, to go ahead and hit the like button, because, you know, it's good for the algorithm. And it also allows me to warrant, you know, bringing Doug back for more conversations. If you guys don't give it a thumbs up, this guy's not coming back. If he's not hit every single time he shows up. But what I want to do is I've actually asked Doug to help me. I've asked him to help me give something away to one of you that's in the chat right now that we're going to open it up to US and Canada. We're going to splurge and do North America. The folks over at Sunset Comics, which is a new comic shop in the LA area, sent over some really awesome books to me, and I'm going to give away a full set of X Corp. And this is rich people, right? These guys run a corporation. These are the true rich right here, right? Mutants with their own island, the multiple businesses. So this is the trade dress, the virgin variant, and then the black and white. We're going to give away a full set of these books to one lucky subscriber right now. And the way that we're going to do it is I'm going to ask the Blue Wrenches to pay attention here in the room to kind of keep me honest on some of this stuff, just in case I mess up. I will tell you, lag is a real thing. Lag is a real thing, so you're going to have to bear with me. If you see your first and I don't see your first, you might not actually be first, okay? But the way we're going to do it is we're going to throw out a trivia question. The first person that is able to answer the question correctly, to Doug's satisfaction, because it'll be Doug that makes the call, will be the winner. Go ahead. What'd you say?
I said, great.
You'll get lots of comments on your blog post now. Man, I was first. Lag, that's not true. Lag's not, I saw myself first. So what is the question, Doug, that we are going to ask people tonight?
Okay. Regie released a blog that I wrote today. I just totally blanked on opportunity costs. Thank you. It featured a huge hot comic right now. What is that comic? Name the comic and issue number.
Quasar. I don't think that's it right there.
Good try, Sandman, good try, Master Blaster, but not Sandman.
That's almost always the answer. That's like Doug's equivalent of C is Sandman. We have Alpha Flight.
Matt, it's not the character, it's the book. Who is under Matt? Chuck Henze, Ultimate Fallout 4. That's the first one I see.
Chuck almost always gets it right. He said 40. I think that is correct. I think that he is the first one that I'm seeing. So Chuck, I think I already have your address, brother, but send me an email to Regie@regiecollects.com and I will bundle this up for you, Chuck, and get it sent out to you. He's got those fast hands. He's like a teacher. So he's like teaching people. So he's like right on it, man. But again, if you guys are not reading the amazing blog post that Doug puts out every single Wednesday, unless I forget, I definitely want to encourage you guys to check it out. The blog post that he put up today on opportunity cost is really well written. I think this is like the second or third one that you've done on opportunity costs. Check them out. The blog posts are really, really wonderful and will, I think, give you some really great things to actually think about. All right. So with that said, Doug, I'm going to thank you for coming on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, brother? Give a shout out to your, whatever it is you want to shout out. Now is your time. All right. So on Instagram, I am Doug.Bratton, BRATTON.9, the number 9. Every Wednesday, you can find a blog post on regiecollects.com. And I would encourage, if people didn't see it, to go check out the interview that 3 Men in the Basement did, live with the Cranky Canadian. Roger Levesque did a phenomenal job and spent a ton of time preparing. And we had a great conversation. And a lot of it was about some of those blog posts that people might not have read yet. And it was a really fun interview. I'd encourage you to go to 3 Men in the Basement and check that out. If you send me the link, brother, just so I have it, I'll make sure I plug it into this video. So if you do that for me, I'll hook that up as a courtesy to both you and Roger. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Be well. Love that guy. Loved. I had no clue he was going to talk about Gen X and the housing crisis. Didn't see it coming. And those are the surprises that I thoroughly enjoy. The very last thing that I want to do before I get myself out of here is I want to give you guys a reminder that I've actually commissioned a new variant. We're going to do a new variant. It is this one right here, Slow City Blues issue #1. They are calling this thing affectionately the fence variant. The fence variant because it has a massive fence behind it. But we're going to do something really cool for this one. This is an indie publication. I've been talking with the inker and the writer like for a while now. We talk almost every day, just kind of checking in with one another. We are going to actually do this thing as a foil variant, limited to 500 copies. The fence that is behind you is going to be turned into foil because I like foil. I'm from the 90s. I collected in the 90s. So if you're interested in picking up a copy of Slow City Blues issue #1, the Regie Collects Fence Variant Foil Edition, you can do so on my website, regiecollects.com. All of the details are there and available to you. With that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation and discussion around whether comic book collecting is for the rich. As always, if you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.